everybody, welcome back to Shoyu Ramen. Today we're going to be recreating a bowl of chuka soba, aka old school shoyu ramen, from a shop in Yokohama, Japan called G-Man 7. What's really interesting about this bowl is that there are no dashi components in it at all, which outside of the mizudori case stuff I feel is pretty rare. I initially had some issues with this bowl finding the right tare for the soup, as I talked about in my last video, but with that simple shoyu tare that I stumbled upon, this one turned out to be pretty amazing. Even though it had no dashi, it had incredible depth of flavor. So if you're someone who doesn't really like fish but always wanted to try out a shoyu ramen, this one is for you. Alright, let's get right into it. So here I'm weighing out 1.1 kilograms or about 2.5 pounds of pork bones, 1.25 kilograms or about 2 3/4 of chicken backs, about 500 grams of chicken feet, and about 200 grams of pork skin. And this is pretty much all we're using for this stock. No fancy double soups or blends for this one. It's an homage to the old school with just chicken and pork. I got my big stock pot out for this one and filled it with 6 liters of water. This will be our main stock pot, and we're going to be doing the pre-boiling in a separate pot of water, so get that one going too. So this is that other pot of boiling water. I'm just going to pre-boil the bones here. For pork bones, I'm going to let them go for 5 minutes. This will help get out the funkiness from the bones prior to putting them into the stock pot, but it's not a long enough time to sap away the pork flavor which we want in the stock. After 5 minutes, I removed the pork bones and rinsed off any of the big clumps of scum that were stuck to them. I then skimmed the scum off the water because I'm going to use the same pot to pre-boil the chicken as well. So while the pre-boil pot was heating back up again, I dropped in the pork bones into my stock pot. And once my other pot was boiling again, I dropped in my chicken backs and let them pre-boil for about 1 minute. A lot of people don't like to pre-boil chicken, but just for me personally, I feel like it doesn't make that big of a difference for the flavor, and it does remove some of the funkiness if the chicken is less than quality. 1 minute is not long enough to extract all the flavor, so you still have a lot of that will go back into the soup. And by the way, we're doing the pre-boils like this instead of all at once because pork bones need a little bit more time to extract flavor than chicken, so this gives the pork bones a little bit of a head start. And after 1 minute of pre-boiling, I dropped the chicken backs into the stock pot with the pork bones. And after that, I just repeated the same process with the chicken feet, 1 minute of pre-boiling and then took them out. And I also cut off the toenails of the feet before dropping them into the stock pot. After a few minutes, a bit of scum should start to form at the top of the soup, so skim that off. You want to keep the soup as clear as possible before going on to the next step. Once all the scum is removed, you can drop in the pork skin and then just keep the pot at the same temperature for a total simmering time of about 7 to 8 hours from whenever the pork bones first went into the pot. You never want to see a rolling boil or anything with the soup, just a bare simmer just like this the entire time. While the soup is doing its thing for the next 7 hours or so, I'm going to make an aroma oil here. Now just straight chicken fat works really great for the soup, but this recipe in this book has a really interesting aroma oil that I wanted to try out. I'm going to boil some pork fat and some chicken skin here for about 30 minutes. Then I strained the fat and skin and then added it to a food processor. Blitz it all up a few times to chop them all into tiny pieces. Then I added the chopped up pork fat and chicken skin mix into a pan. And once I got everything in there, I added a mix of half peanut oil and half olive oil. And then I just cooked this at low heat until everything in there was golden brown. Of course, you want to stir the pot the entire time to make sure it doesn't burn at the bottom. I think it took around 45 minutes from start to finish to make this, so it wasn't quick, but I mean, the soup's gonna go for 7 hours and it's not like I was going anywhere that day. So anyways, it looks like this at the end. So at this point, I just strained it out and then I saved the bits of fried skin and pork for a topping. This was a pretty strange aroma oil. The aroma was very porky. So, I mean, if that's what you're looking for, if you like just lard as your aroma oil, I think this one is pretty cool. But for me personally, I think I just prefer straight chicken fat. But I'm glad I tried it, and the pork fat chicken skin thing did make an interesting topping. So maybe I'll play around with that a little bit later. Anyways, with about 3 hours left to go in the stock, I started prepping the aromatics. Aromatics for this one's really simple. Just some green parts of some green onions and 1 head of garlic cut in half. Super simple. So with 3 hours left, I dropped them into the pot. The green onions, the head of garlic, and oh, I forgot, I also added about 1 gram of dry Japanese chilies. And actually, with the chilies, I kind of chickened out and I took out some of them because it started to smell a lot like chili pepper, so I just took them out, but I think it would have been fine. Probably would have been fine. Anyways, after I added the aromatics, I just let the soup continue to do this bare simmer for another 3 hours, and then the soup was pretty much done. So from the time the pork bones hit the water in the stock pot until I finished it, took it off the stove, it was about 7 hours. And this soup is really high in gelatin, as you can see here. And that's from the pork skin and the chicken feet. And it's a pretty cool soup. The mouthfeel is incredible. I strained out the soup to rest it overnight. I like to strain out the soup this way instead of just pouring it all through a strainer because I find that this method of ladling the soup one ladle at a time tends to disturb the gunk at the bottom of the pot a little bit less. Anyways, I started with 6 liters of water and ended up with about 4 liters, which is about 12 servings of soup. So if you're trying to make this for your family or something, you can kind of keep that in mind. I also forgot to film this, but once I got this soup all strained out, I transferred the soup into delis to cool them down faster and so I could get them in the fridge more quickly, and then I let them rest overnight. So this is what the soup looks like after resting overnight, and as you can see, it's pretty gelatinous. It also has this layer of fat at the top. You're going to want to skim that off because you don't want that going into your final bowl of soup. You have your own aroma oil that you're going to use instead. I got 1 serving of soup into a small pot to heat up, and then at the same time I got my noodles and my toppings ready so I could get everything assembled quickly once the noodles were done cooking. Once the soup hit 190 degrees Fahrenheit, I dropped in my noodles and started to get my bowl ready. So for this bowl I did 30 ml of the simple shoyu tare that I did in the previous video, about 15 ml of the aroma oil, some grated apple, about maybe a teaspoon of grated apple, and 300 milliliters of the hot soup. The noodles took about a minute, and when they were cooked, I strained them well and then added them to the bowl. These were Ramen Lord's makeshift Hakata style noodles, by the way. I think they are the bee's knees, so check them out in his cookbook. I'll link it up in the description below. For toppings, I did pork belly chashu, some green onions, some radish sprouts, which is kind of unusual for me anyway, some menma, which are lacto-fermented bamboo shoots, and some of that pork fat and chicken skin fried bits from the aroma oil. And that's it. That's my twist, my take on an homage to an old school chuka soba as inspired by G-Men 7 in Yokohama, Japan. So initially when I read this recipe, I was a little skeptical that it would have enough umami considering there's no kombu or no types of dashi components at all, but I was pretty blown away by how great the soup tasted. The mouthfeel was on point and it was very, very drinkable. I did feel it was missing a little bit in terms of acidity, so when I made this bowl again for myself, I changed the aroma oil to just straight chicken fat and then added a little bit of lemon zest at the bottom, and it was amazing. I actually preferred it a lot better actually. So there's this trend in Japanese ramen recently to get back to simplicity, and I think I understand why after making this bowl. This bowl actually has fairly few ingredients, but each one is shining through and is doing its part. As I said in many of my videos in the past, my criteria of what makes a great bowl of ramen is everything needs to be working together and not fighting for attention. And this bowl definitely does that, and I think simplifying the total amount of ingredients that you use can also make achieving that balance just a little bit easier. So anyways, if you have 7 hours one day to watch a pot on the stove, make sure it doesn't boil for 7 hours, you can give this one a shot. I actually really enjoyed it, and I probably will be making it again in the future. But anyways, let me know what you think about this bowl or what you're working on or what you're interested in as far as seeing on this channel in the future. You can leave that in the comments, or as always, you can hit me up on Instagram at @wayoframen. Thank you all so much for watching and for all of the support. I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.